Let's play a small game. Close your eyes for just a moment and think about the word belief. What comes to mind? Something sacred, something personal, something that you chose. Now here's the unsettling truth. Most of what you believe was never really yours to begin with. From the way you talk, to the things you fear, to the type of people you love, every piece of your identity has been quietly sculpted, not by reason or choice, but by the invisible hands of those closest to you. Your parents, your friends, your culture, your partner. They didn't need hypnotic spirals or secret laboratories to do it. All they needed was time, proximity, and emotion. Because real brainwashing doesn't happen in dark rooms with flashing lights. It happens at the dinner table. It happens during childhood bedtime stories. It happens every time someone says, "That's just how we do things in this family." You see, the science of brainwashing isn't just about control. It's about shaping identity itself. And the most dangerous part, you don't even notice it's happening. In this video, we're not talking about cults or dictatorships. We're talking about the everyday, invisible manipulations that teach you who to be. The kind of psychological conditioning that hides behind words like tradition, loyalty, and love. By the time we're done, you'll see that the people who raised you may have also rewired you. That love can be both a shelter and a cage, and that the line between guidance and control is much thinner than you think. So sit back, take a deep breath, and prepare yourself. Because once you understand how the brainwashing of family and relationships truly works, you'll never look at the word love the same way again. The psychology of conditioning, how beliefs take root in the mind. Every human brain begins as an open field, fertile, untouched, and ready to grow whatever seeds are planted in it. But the mind doesn't come with a filter. It can't tell a truth from a lie or wisdom from manipulation, not at first. That filter, the part of you that says, "Wait, this doesn't feel right," only develops years later. So in the beginning, everything that's said to you, every rule, every phrase, every punishment slips straight into the soil of your subconscious. And once it's there, it begins to take root. Psychologists call this process conditioning, the same principle used to train animals, build habits, or teach obedience. But when applied to a developing human mind, it becomes something far more powerful: identity construction. When a child hears, "Don't cry, strong people don't show emotion," that belief doesn't stay a sentence. It becomes a rule about survival. When a teenager is told, "People like us don't question authority," it becomes a silent script that dictates behavior long into adulthood. By the time you're old enough to think independently, most of your choices are already pre-programmed reactions. You think you're choosing your career, your religion, your type of partner, but in reality, you're following invisible instructions written years before you could even spell your own name. And here, where it gets darker, the human brain wants to belong. Our neurons are wired to seek acceptance because, in ancient times, being rejected by the tribe meant death. So even when we sense something is wrong, even when a belief feels suffocating, we cling to it, because the alternative is isolation. That's why people stay in toxic families. That's why they defend traditions that harm them. That's why they confuse loyalty with love. In neuroscience, there's something called the repetition effect. The more often you hear something, the more true it feels. And families, intentionally or not, use this effect constantly. Family comes first. Never question your elders. Forgive and forget. Repeat a phrase long enough, and it becomes part of your emotional DNA. It's not mind control in the cinematic sense. It's slower, softer, more intimate. It doesn't need to erase your thoughts. It only needs to guide them gently toward the path they want you to walk. By the time you reach adulthood, the architecture of your mind already bears their fingerprints. You're not just a product of your experiences. You're a mirror of someone else's belief system. And here's the chilling part. Most people never realize this. They live and die inside a mental framework built by someone else's fears, someone else's values, someone else's version of right. The science of brainwashing begins not with manipulation, but with trust. Because to rewire a person's mind, you first have to convince them that you love them. Love as a weapon. How affection becomes a tool of control. Love is supposed to be safe. It's supposed to free you, comfort you, make you feel seen. But under the surface of that warmth lies the most powerful psychological weapon ever discovered: Emotional conditioning through affection. When someone gives you love and takes it away in patterns, your brain doesn't interpret it as manipulation. It interprets it as survival training. Neuroscientists call this the intermittent reinforcement cycle. It's the same principle that keeps gamblers hooked on slot machines. When affection, praise, or approval becomes unpredictable, when it's sometimes there and sometimes not, your brain starts chasing it, craving the next win. You begin to associate pleasure with compliance. You start to believe that being good, agreeing, or staying silent earns you love, while resistance earns you pain. And that's how genuine emotion becomes a leash. Parents use this, often unknowingly. They smile and say, "I'm proud of you," when you obey, but withdraw when you question them. Partners use it too, through guilt, through silence, through conditional affection. A simple sentence like, "I guess you don't love me anymore," is enough to send your brain into a spiral of self-doubt. This cycle rewires the reward system in your brain. Dopamine, the chemical of pleasure and motivation, starts linking itself not to your own happiness, but to the approval of others. That's why some people can't stand disappointing their parents, even in adulthood. Why some lovers keep returning to relationships that hurt them. It's not weakness. It's neurological addiction. When love becomes conditional, it's no longer love, it's control disguised as care. The smile that follows obedience. The cold silence that punishes independence. These moments don't just shape behavior, they sculpt identity. Because every time you betray yourself to keep someone else happy, a part of your mind learns that authenticity is dangerous. You start editing your personality for peace. You smile when you're angry. You agree when you want to scream. And slowly, you disappear, replaced by the version of you that others find acceptable. That's why so many people feel trapped in lives they never chose. They're not living, they're performing roles that were programmed into them years ago. Roles like the good daughter, the loyal son, the forgiving partner. But hear the haunting truth. Every manipulative system, from toxic families to authoritarian regimes, runs on the same fuel. Love, not hate, because hate creates rebellion. But love makes you surrender willingly. The cruel irony is that the very thing that makes us human, our capacity to love deeply, is the same thing that makes us easiest to control. And once someone learns how to weaponize your affection, they never have to use force again. The family factory, how traditions and upbringing program the mind. Every family is a small, self-contained factory, producing not just meals and memories, but identities. And like any factory, it follows a system: input, process, output. Only here, the product is you. From the moment you're born, the assembly line begins. You're handed rules disguised as values, stories disguised as truth, and expectations disguised as love. Be respectful. Follow our religion. Marry someone like us. Don't shame the family. It sounds harmless, even noble. But beneath these phrases lies a quiet message. You don't belong to yourself. Sociologists call this cultural imprinting, the process of transferring group values and behaviors into an individual's identity. It's how tribes survived for centuries. It's how communities preserve order. But it's also how conformity becomes inherited obedience. The family doesn't just teach you what to believe. It teaches you how to believe, with certainty, loyalty, and emotional weight. So when someone questions your upbringing, it doesn't just feel like disagreement. It feels like betrayal. And here's the most chilling part. The more emotional the ritual, the deeper it embeds into your subconscious. A religion passed down through prayer. A political bias shared over family dinners. A gender role taught through reward and ridicule. All of it shapes the neural pathways that define your identity. By the time you leave home, your brain is already preloaded with scripts. How to love, how to suffer, how to fit in. And when those scripts clash with your authentic self, you feel guilt, because the family factory doesn't just build beliefs, it builds emotional locks to keep you from escaping them. That's why questioning tradition feels like sin. That's why walking a different path feels wrong, even when it's right. You're not just defying your parents, you're defying the entire psychological system that raised them. Think about it. How many people spend their entire lives trying to live up to expectations they never agreed to? How many carry invisible debts of loyalty, afraid that choosing freedom means betraying their bloodline? This is the genius of generational brainwashing. It doesn't need a villain. It runs automatically, passed down like DNA. Each generation programs the next, calling it guidance. Each child absorbs it, calling it tradition. And so the cycle continues, a lineage of conditioned minds, each believing they're free because they were never taught what freedom actually feels like. If you zoom out far enough, you'll see something haunting. Our beliefs, our customs, our very sense of self, they aren't random. They're inherited scripts, shaped by centuries of repetition, written by ancestors we've never met. We call it family, but in truth, it's the most elegant psychological institution ever created. The partner effect, subtle mind control in romantic relationships. They say love changes you, but few ever ask how much or into whom. When two people fall in love, their brains don't just connect emotionally, they begin to synchronize neurologically. Studies using brain scans have shown that partners start mirroring each other's facial expressions, tone, body language, even neural activity. Their dopamine and oxytocin levels rise and fall together. It's beautiful, but it's also dangerous. Because once your brain links pleasure to another person, it gives them power over your sense of self. Their approval becomes your reward. Their silence becomes your punishment. And slowly, your emotional compass begins to point toward one direction, them. That's where romantic brainwashing begins. Not through manipulation or deceit, but through the chemistry of attachment itself. At first, it feels like fusion. You finish each other's sentences, share each other's moods, lose track of where I ends and we begins. But behind that unity hides a subtle erosion. Individuality starts to dissolve. When one partner is emotionally dominant, more persuasive, louder, or more wounded, the relationship becomes a classroom of control. You learn what topics are safe, what emotions get you affection, what opinions cause withdrawal. And before long, you're living according to an invisible emotional rulebook. You start censoring your words, not because you're afraid of punishment, but because you've been trained to avoid disconnection. This is emotional conditioning at its most intimate level. Partners do this without realizing it. They teach each other what love should look like, and in doing so, rewrite each other's emotional software. One teaches the other that jealousy equals love. Another teaches that sacrifice equals loyalty. And some even teach that suffering equals commitment. That's how relationships become prisons, built not with walls, but with shared delusions. The irony is that the same chemicals responsible for bonding, oxytocin and dopamine, also reinforce control. The more emotionally entangled you are, the harder it becomes to see clearly. You start to defend their actions, justify their cruelty, even adopt their worldview. Psychologists call this introjection, when you internalize someone else's beliefs or values as your own, simply because love made them feel true. It's why victims of toxic relationships often say, "I don't even know who I am anymore," because their identity has been replaced with the reflection of the person they loved. But it's not all one-sided. Manipulation in love is often mutual. Both partners mold each other, consciously or subconsciously, to fit their own emotional narratives. In trying to be loved, we become what the other person desires, even if it means betraying our authentic selves. This isn't romance. It's a psychological feedback loop, each person reinforcing the other's illusions, until both forget what truth even looks like. And here's the hardest truth of all. Sometimes the person who loves you most is also the one who erases you completely. Because love isn't always a connection between two souls. Sometimes it's the merging of two prisons. Breaking the spell, recognizing the signs of psychological conditioning, 23-0028-00. Most people never realize they've been programmed. Because brainwashing isn't something you see, it's something you live inside of. It's the water the fish never questions. The air you've been breathing since birth. But every so often, something cracks the illusion. A breakup. A fight. A moment of silence when you hear your own thoughts, and they sound foreign, like someone else is speaking through you. That's when the unraveling begins. Because once you notice the pattern, you can't unsee it. The first sign of conditioning is emotional guilt for thinking freely. You question a family rule or a partner's belief, and instantly you feel anxious. That anxiety isn't proof that you're wrong. It's the echo of your conditioning trying to pull you back in. Second, you find yourself justifying other people's control. You tell yourself, they only want what's best for me. You call manipulation care. You call control protection. You convince yourself that obedience is love, because the opposite, independence, feels terrifying. Third, you start noticing emotional triggers that don't belong to you. Maybe you feel shame for saying no. Maybe you feel guilty for resting or for choosing yourself. These reactions are the fingerprints of someone else's belief system, still operating in your mind. They are proof that parts of your psyche were built to serve others, not you. And then comes the hardest part, the silence. When you finally start to reclaim your mind, the people who benefited from your compliance begin to resist. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're selfish, disrespectful, cold. They'll guilt you, gaslight you, and try to pull you back into the role you once played. But understand this. The moment they start fighting for the old you, it's because the old you served them. The real you does not. Breaking the spell isn't dramatic. It's not about confrontation or revenge. It's quiet. It's the gradual process of unlearning, peeling away every borrowed belief and asking, who told me this, and why did I believe them? At first, that question feels dangerous. But over time, it becomes liberating. Because awareness is the antidote to manipulation. You can't be brainwashed and awake at the same time. The science of it is simple. Every time you question an automatic belief, you activate the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, and weaken the emotional circuitry of obedience that was built through repetition. In other words, the more you think consciously, the less control your past has over you. Freedom doesn't begin with rebellion. It begins with recognition. And recognition begins with one painful, beautiful realization. You were never broken. You were programmed. And anything programmed can be rewritten. Reprogramming the mind, reclaiming your beliefs and the chilling truth about freedom, 28-0033-00. You can't erase the past, but you can rewrite the code it left inside you. And that begins with awareness. Because the moment you see your own conditioning, it loses its power. You stop reacting and start choosing. Reprogramming the mind isn't about rejecting your family, your culture, or your partner. It's about reclaiming authorship over your thoughts. Asking yourself, is this belief mine or was it given to me? Does it serve me or does it serve someone else? The human brain is remarkably adaptable. Neural pathways that once carried the weight of obedience can be reshaped through reflection and new experiences. Every time you choose truth over comfort or honesty over approval, you are literally rewiring your mind neuron by neuron, away from submission and toward freedom. It's not an instant transformation. It's slow, messy, painful even, because every time you shed a belief, you also shed a piece of the person others told you to be. But what remains, that quiet, raw, unfiltered self, is real. And realness is where freedom begins. Reprogramming doesn't mean isolation either. It means connection by choice, not by conditioning. It means loving without losing yourself. It means being loyal without surrendering your autonomy. It means understanding that love and control are not the same language, even if you were taught they were. And here's the chilling paradox. The freer your mind becomes, the lonelier the world around you may feel. Because when you wake up, you start to notice how asleep everyone else still is. You see the parents repeating their parents' mistakes. You see partners clinging to toxic love because it feels familiar. You see entire generations defending their own psychological cages, calling it tradition. You'll want to save them, but you can't, because waking up isn't something you can do for someone else. It's a choice, one that must come from within. All you can do is live differently. Speak truth even when your voice shakes. Question everything, even the things that make you comfortable. Especially the things that make you comfortable. And as you do, something miraculous happens. You stop being the product of other people's stories and become the author of your own. That's the real science of brainwashing and the secret to undoing it. Not resistance, not rebellion, but awareness. Because once you understand the machinery of control, the patterns, the conditioning, the emotional manipulation, you can step outside of it. And from that moment on, no one can ever own your mind again. So ask yourself quietly, honestly, who am I when no one is watching? Who would I be if love didn't come with conditions? That's not just self-reflection. That's the beginning of your deprogramming. And maybe, just maybe, the scariest kind of freedom is the one that finally belongs to you.